Hello, everybody. Thank you for
Hello.
taking the time to join us. Let's, as we usually do, just dive straight in. So, you probably signed up to this webinar because, well, either you're running webinars or you're just interested in content repurposing in general. What we tend to see with a lot of contrast customers, but also just companies in general, is most companies run one webinar a month. And I think it's one webinar a month because it takes so much time and effort and energy to actually make a good webinar that sometimes it's hard to
You're even
do,
happy when it's over.
you're like, thank God this webinar is done. All the stress, all the build-up of the stress until you go live. And very few companies are successful in running more than one webinar a month. Later on in this webinar, we'll have Olivia from airfocus, who's going to jump on and tell us a bit about her webinars and their strategy and how they repurpose and stuff like that. And they've been very successful in running a little more than one webinar a month. I think it's one every 3 weeks, but she'll tell us more about that. And today we're going to talk about the different processes and tips to create content that, one, is repurposable, and two, that's nearly ready to publish. So we're going to talk about AI today. I think we all agree that AI is not in a state where currently you can just take AI output and publish it straight away. Like, we're not there yet.
Please
But if we
don't.
can get, please don't, we're begging you, don't make us read another 100% ChatGPT post. But it can help us get 85, 90% of the way there. And in this webinar, we'll be talking about progressively, more advanced forms of repurposing, from just distributing the replay to getting a whole month, 10 plus pieces of content from a webinar using repurposing. Is this a disclaimer? What we're going to talk about today, you can make use of whether or not you use Contrast as your webinar platform. And that's really important because, maybe
This is how we
you're
started, right? We started repurposing without our own product, and it's actually this process that inspired us to create some features. But yeah, I don't think. Let's firstly look at the one without contrast, and then later we can look at contrast, Maxime. I think that's the best flow, no?
I think it'll make the most sense. So, as we show here, I think the most basic form of repurposing is the replay. Just making sure your webinar is available on demand. Recently, I think, what was it, 2 weeks ago, we did a big analysis of all of our viewer data. We selected 100,000 registrants across webinars over the past year, and we figured out that 63% of views are on demand on average across all companies, and 46% of people only watch the replay. So if you're not hosting the replay, you're potentially missing out on pretty much half of the views. So if you use contrasts, well, that's easy. You already get the replay, it's already sent out to everyone. If you don't, take it, upload it to YouTube, make sure you keep distributing the replay. You're leaving half the value straight up on the table if you're not distributing that replay. A few tips to make your replay even better. Make sure it's SEO optimized. We think about chapters, we think about titles, descriptions, keywords. We've seen webinar landing pages rank for very long tail keywords, and that can be really interesting for some companies. But also make sure it's easily accessible for viewers. So send it as follow-up, but also keep talking about it after the live. What a waste of time if you just have this replay and you're not doing anything with it. So that's for the replay. But if you're spending hours and hours and hours organizing the webinar, writing the script, finding your guests, marketing the event, it's just not enough to be satisfied with the replay. You have to do more than that, right? And what else, what can you do with your webinar? There are so many different formats you can look into. So obviously you have the on-demand version of the webinar. So the replay, this can be on your webinar platform. This can be on YouTube. It can be pretty much anywhere. It can be on your website, for example, embedded on your website. But what if, you could take this webinar and turn it into a blog post, or you could turn it into social posts. Here we have a post from Tim. with a clip of the webinar that we hosted a few weeks ago, and a sort of a recap of everything we talked about. Or you could extract testimonials or quotes, what were interesting things that were said during the webinar. Or you could turn it into short clips. I think we're seeing a lot of vertical video at the moment. Even LinkedIn is testing a vertical video feed. I don't know if you've seen that. That's kind of crazy. The TikTokification of LinkedIn. That's kind of.
I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
I'm not ready. Every other video is going to start with unpopular opinion. But yeah, there's so much potential for different formats you can get from a webinar. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to drive through what was sort of the old way of repurposing. How did we used to repurpose content? So you've just run your webinar and you want to distribute the replay, or you want to keep driving use of the replay. The first thing you have to figure out is, what was the webinar actually about? Maybe you weren't moderating this session, or maybe you had a meeting during the webinar, and maybe you don't even know, maybe you're just the content intern and your job is to repurpose the webinar and you don't even know what it was about other than the title and the description. So the old way was, well, one, you rewatch the entire webinar, you take notes, and you sort of use that as a basis for content. But this takes 2+ hours, a first watch through, then maybe a second watch through at 2x speed.
Take notes. You gotta pause the video all the time.
And then you can't hear, and you have to go and ask the person what they said. It's a pain. So we thought, how can we make this easier? And I think when we really started thinking about this, we were also really starting to see like the first signs of like ChatGPT and stuff coming out. It was what, 18 months ago, maybe a little less than 2 years ago.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so we came up with this pretty basic process, but that can be a bit time consuming. So the first step is to get the transcript of the webinar. So this is going to save you a ton of time rewatching, and it's going to make it easier to find the most important parts. It's a lot easier to Command F and search for a keyword than it is to click through a video. Clicking through a video is a pain. So you can use tools like Happy Scribe. If you type video to text in Google, you're going to find a bajillion different tools to do this.
Especially since ChatGPT and all the craze.
Especially since ChatGPT. So first, you get the transcript. But then we wondered, how can we take this a step further? What if we could use AI to actually index the entire webinar? So to understand what the webinar was about and when people talked about different topics during the webinar. And this is something a human can't really do. Like, it's very, very hard to watch a 1-hour video and create a summary of everything that was said, when it was said, how different topics relate and stuff like that. Like,
the numbers.
It's hard, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. And what if we could get AI to quickly summarize and find the most important points that we could then create the content around? Not only do we save 2+ hours, but it's also now a lot easier to extract the main pieces of information from the webinar. So a way to do this is you take the transcript from earlier, you upload it into ChatGPT. Maybe you have GPT-4, you can upload a text file. And with a specific prompt, you ask for the highlights of the webinar, organized into different bullet points. And from that, you then have a basis from which to go back through the transcripts, find the most important parts, and create content around that. So
yeah, and you can even tell ChatGPT, okay, if you found this highlight, you can tell ChatGPT, okay, dive deeper into this highlight. So you can actually use it as a starting point for more content. And that's how I personally also used it, is to create more content from the transcript by simply using one of the chapters or the highlights that ChatGPT found.
This is, I think we talked about this last webinar, Luke, but it was AI inspired rather than AI generated. Remember?
Yeah,
what was it exactly?
Yeah.
We can't even remember.
Something AI inspired.
Yeah, I think it was AI inspired.
Yeah.
Okay, so transcript, indexing, and then, let's say you want to make some short clips or stuff like that. Then using another prompt, you can ask for the most interesting moments or what would be the most viral moments. Then you download the video, you upload into an editing tool like Descript. Shout out to Descript, we love Descript. Cut the part of the video you want to turn into a clip, add it to subtitles, maybe make it vertical. brand the video, download it, and post it on social media. Does that sound like a lot of work? It is. It is. Actually, we had a feature. We were doing this for customers, right?
Yeah, we had the brilliant idea of, hey, let's not build video clips yet, but first we see if people actually want this as a feature. So we added it to Contrast, and then it just sent a form where people could fill in what type of video they want, and that would send a message to our Slack telling, hey, create the video. So we were manually creating all of these videos for our customers, but it was such a huge success that we actually decided, okay, we got to ship this feature inside Contrast.
And I think not only did it sort of really show that we had to ship this feature, but it also taught us how to ship it, right? Because we got so much feedback from our customers saying that the logo is too big, we need this background, the subtitles are too big, or we need to be able to edit the transcript. Like, I think all of these, it made it super easy for us to scope out the feature, right?
Exactly.
What do people actually need?
Yeah.
So yeah, before a few months ago, this was pretty much Luke's job. Every time we'd run a webinar, Luke would go through this whole process. How long do you think it would take, total? You go from webinar to blog article in a few assets.
A blog article, I mean, I had to watch it back, or use Happy Transcribe, but then you need to download, upload. So that also takes at least, I don't know, 3 hours to get something semi-decent, 6 hours to get a good blog article out. A video clip is a bit faster, right? It's maybe, I don't know, 45 minutes end to end, but still a lot of time, and you need to learn yet another tool. You need to pay for yet another tool. So it's far from great.
Yeah, it's potentially a lot of effort. And so, we thought, what if we take this whole process and build it directly into the product? So, Luke, maybe you can walk us through what this looks like in Contrast.
Yeah, of course. I don't want to pitch too much, so we can go super fast through this. But now every customer that runs a webinar on Contrast, what we auto do is generate their transcript of the webinar, so they don't even have to think about it. It's right there. Maxime is pointing it out. And so what we essentially have done in the background is we have auto-indexed the webinar already. So we know what the webinar is about. We know what the most interesting points are. The transcript, you can copy it and start using that somewhere else. But I think that's just step one, in an entire workflow to get something like a blog article. So what we built right in there is that you can either select the entire transcript, or you can select a part of the text, and then you can say, okay, give me a blog article, or give me a LinkedIn post. And what we did is we created different models for these different, let's call them outputs, so that you always get high quality output. In this case, I think you have selected these highlights, which are, for me, I think one of the biggest things, is because you click on that button, you get all of the highlights. You don't even have to watch the webinar yourself, or you can repurpose a webinar that you run maybe like a month ago that you completely forgot about what it was, and you get the summary, you get the highlights, you even get action items, you get quotes. So there's so much information in there that is essentially giving you a starting point of, okay, what is next? What is the content I can create next?
Yeah, and you also get the free transcription tool, right? You don't even have to pay for it. That's automatic.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I'm forgetting that because it feels like so natural to me today. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but if you want to just copy it, and I think we see a lot of people take the transcript, embed the replay onto their website, and then add the transcripts as something that people can read. They can just copy paste it from here and add it to their website.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. So after highlights.
Yeah. Highlights. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so we talked about highlights, and then maybe going back. You already talked about selecting pieces of text and having it generate pieces of content.
Yeah.
But something that I think, I was going to say we, but you did pretty well here was Repurpose AI uses the language from the webinar to generate the drafts of all the content. I think a lot of I see blurry. Okay, let me zoom in. We'll send you the FigJam anyway if you want to look through this. We're talking through everything. But Repurpose AI uses the language from the transcript to make all of the content. So it'll sound a lot more like whatever was said during the webinar. It'll use the same tone, it'll use the same vocabulary, it'll use the same words, and it'll avoid all of these very, chat GPT like formulations.
I mean, this is
Of
the
course,
great thing, because if you really think about it, the people that come to your webinars, it's typically, I don't know, a CMO, a CEO, and these people are very, very expert talking about a very, very niche problem. Imagine that you're a content creator and that you need to ask your CEO to give an hour of their time to create a blog article. In most companies, that just doesn't work that way because the CEO is busy, but they're more than happy to come on a webinar. So I think the unique thing about this is that not only is the quality of the content very, very high, something that you would normally get, you save a lot of time, but also because we have designed the models in a way to listen to what you're saying in the webinar, it will use your language, the words that you are using. And instead, when you look at ChatGPT, what ChatGPT is doing, you say, okay, let's create a webinar, let's create a blog article about webinar attention. What ChatGPT is going to do is it's going to look at all of the information it has and do the statistical analysis of what is the next word, right? And you get generic.
Which is the most generic. Yeah, exactly. That's the definition of generic, right? Is what is the most statistically probable thing that's going to come, and that's going to give you very generic content with no personal anecdotes, no experience, no numbers, nothing, because it just doesn't have them, right?
Yeah.
So then, sort of closing off the Repurpose AI section. Maybe you can talk a little bit about Clips AI. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Clips AI.
So we have always had clips in contrast, but just a clip to get a moment from the webinar. And now, and I think we shipped it 2 weeks ago, the only thing that you need to do is run your webinar. You come back to your webinar and we propose, based on a couple of viral concepts, the 5 clips from your webinar that are most likely to go viral. And of course, you can change the subtitles if there's an error in there. You can change the color, you can change the font, you can change it from portrait to landscape or the other way around. Anything that makes the video, of course, feel more like you is there. But the cool thing I think about it is that you don't even have to think about, okay, what is the best moment for me to clip? You can just go in there, download a clip. It looks and feels like your brand, which is super cool. And still, if you don't like it, you can go back to the transcript that we showed before, and you can select a part of the transcript and clip that as well.
So my question for you, Luke, is how do we find the 5 most interesting moments? What does that look like behind the scenes?
So it's a little bit difficult to explain, but there are core components of when something is likely to go viral. If you look, for example, if you open up, I don't know, Twitter or even LinkedIn right now, please don't do it right now. But what you will see is that most of the successful posts, they have something like a hook, a personal anecdote in there. Numbers tend to work really, really well. So we have trained a model to look for these sort of signals, find these signals, and then propose a clip based upon them.
Amazing. Okay, so moving on from the clips, another aspect, and I think maybe an underused aspect of Repurpose AI is the refine feature. You can imagine refine as being able to talk to your webinar. So every time you ask for a prompt, you ask it to create a blog or a newsletter or a LinkedIn post, you can go back and forth with the answer with the little ask AI to refine the result. So there are so many use cases for refine, and I think Olivia is going to talk to us about how she uses refine later.
I see her in the backstage and she's like nodding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to talk about refine. But yeah, you can ask it to change the tone, make it longer, make it shorter, translate it into a different language. You can say this blog article is for this keyword, so make sure you include XYZ. You can ask for it to use direct quotes and citations. There are really so many ways you can use refine. And Luke was telling me about how he actually made one of our last blog articles, which is this one. I think Tim is going to drop the link in chat. And what he did pretty much was he asked for the standard blog output, which is by default 1,500 words. And then by going down the article H2 by H2, he was asking Refine to dive deeper and give even more information and even more context about each of those subsections. And then he took all of those outputs and sort of summed them into one much bigger, what is it, like 25 or 3,000 word article?
3,000
Yeah.
words. Yeah. I mean, if you're skeptical about AI writing a blog article, I get why you're skeptical, especially if you're using ChatGPT. Like, don't do that. But this for me is the proof point. I'm even not embarrassed at all about this article that we created using AI. Of course, I still spend 20% of my time adding links, adding images, fine-tuning the copy here and there. But I'm so certain that this is a great article that for every demo that I do with a customer or a potential customer, this is the example that I send to them. I say, this is what you can get with contrast after your webinar is over. And so far, the reactions have always been great.
I think you also did, one of those "is it AI" tests, and it came back like 90% human or 95% human.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Which is very hard to get if you're taking like a pure ChatGPT output. Okay, so we're 22 minutes in. I also have a bit of time to talk to Olivia. There's one last thing I want to talk about, and this is some tips on how to host webinars or how to plan webinars that make for more repurposable webinars or from which you can create content. And to me, the tip is really to think about it backwards. The best way to create a webinar that's easy or good to repurpose is to think about it backwards. What would make for a good short clip? Or what is the kind of info that I would like to have included in a blog article? Or what would my mailing list like to know from this person, from this guest or on this topic? And usually the answer is going to be they want someone to tell about their experience. How did they live through situation X, Y, Z, or what did they think about it? They want numbers and examples. We increased I was going to say increased acquisition costs. We decreased acquisition costs by 22% by doing X, Y, Z. Anecdotes and stories, oh, I remember 10 years ago when I was blah, blah, blah. Funny moments, jokes. We like to have very relaxed webinars, and I think everyone appreciates having a bit of a laugh, even in B2B. That's true. But also from a format standpoint, what makes for good content on other platforms? It's faces, it's visuals, it's having your brand out there. So when planning your webinar, make sure you leave room for questions for your guest speakers. Ask them specifics. They tell you we increased this by that. Well, ask them how, or ask them to tell the story. Give them a bit more room to actually tell you about themselves, their lives, and their experiences. Interact with your audience, whatever your audience is asking through the chat. That always makes for good content because it's people questions are asking. And ask for more details and numbers. Another thing is just act like a human. If you crack a joke and it makes everyone laugh, or if there's a bug and you're kind of stressed out and it's funny, those make for great clips too. I don't think everything has to be 100% like value driven and serious. You can also innovate a bit and do things.
We actually fixed the bug 10 minutes ago before we're gonna do the demo.
Yesterday, Luke was like, Salim, this is urgent. We have a webinar tomorrow demoing Repurpose AI, and this is broken. Please fix this. But yeah. And okay, then finally, what makes for great clips or great repurposable content? I think different formats than just PowerPoints. People really like our Fig Jams. They make for nice sort of visual maps that you can go back and look through at the end. Sometimes a bit more exciting than some slides. I was looking at Prezi. Do you remember Prezi? Prezi is kind of an old tool now. Yeah. It's fun, it's different than just slides. Try to zoom on faces when people are saying something that's interesting. In a second, we're going to talk to Olivia. I'm going to take the screen share off and we're just going to talk to Olivia, right? We don't need the screen share when we're talking to Olivia. And finally, brand your webinar. If you're running webinars and you're branding your webinars, you're wasting a ton of time and energy. Choose a platform that just allows you to brand your webinar. I think that's it. Luke, do we have anything we want to add before we have Olivia join us?
No, I'm excited to see Olivia use it. I think
Me too.
that's going to be great.
Me too. Me too. In the chat, don't forget to ask us questions if you have any.
Or
We'll
for
be answering
Olivia as
questions,
well.
or for Olivia as well. If Olivia said that if she had some questions for her, she'd also stay for Q&A. So if you have any questions about Repurpose AI or about our process, or for Luke will be joining us later for some Q&A. Drop him in chat. And Luke, I'll see you in like 10 minutes when we're done with Olivia.
Yeah, let's do it.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Hello, Olivia.
Hi, Maxime. Hi, everyone. Great to be
How's
here.
it going?
Good. Very well. I also got some new tips from you guys from the initial part of the presentation, so you're always learning. Yeah, really happy to be here.
That's the point. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's really I'm really happy to have you specifically. I think airfocus has been incredibly successful with webinars recently, so I'd love to know why. I'd love to ask you a few questions about it. But yeah, just thanks for taking the time and for jumping on with us. I'm sure you have a lot to teach some people who are here in chat. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what is your role specifically at airfocus.
Yeah, I head up the marketing team, and for anyone who's not familiar with airfocus, we provide a product management software to help create better alignment within teams. And my team primarily, our main goal is the kind of lead gen, bringing in this interest, generating this demand, measured kind of, I would say, in inbound opportunities. So
Okay.
I would say lead gen is pretty much first and foremost what we think about, but as well thought leadership branding, that's particularly important, and webinars kind of meet both of these goals for us.
Nice. Okay, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is your main goals for webinars. So you talk about lead gen, but also branding, thought leadership, brand awareness.
For sure. So for our webinars, and I would say, we're running a series right now that's like top voices in product management. This is very, very oriented towards thought leadership. So we, of course, ask for people's details when they come on the platform and when they're watching a replay or whatever, but we try to keep it really kind of low entry threshold. We try to just be seen as this like source of knowledge, this kind of valuable content, insights for PMs. And we really try to make it a win-win-win for all parties involved. So for the speakers, they get a great platform. For us, we get to engage with our community. For the community who's watching, they get some actionable tips and insights. So that's really kind of first and foremost. And then honestly, if we manage out of that to spark a conversation, whether that's a sales conversation or like a social media conversation or anything else, that's definitely a win for us.
I love that you say, I was going to ask you because you said win, win, win. And I was like, who's the third party? But obviously it's the speaker.
Sure.
And I think this also ties into repurposing really well, because if you can create a ton of repurposed content, then you can send that to the speaker, and that gives them a ton of assets that they can then use to share on their blog or for social posts or stuff like that.
Absolutely. Makes it very easy for them as well to then follow up, and you get multiple channels kind of for the cost of one.
Exactly. And so would you say that webinars play a big role in your lead gen or like your revenue driving efforts today?
I think it's always a little bit difficult to measure one-to-one. Anybody who's like in marketing understands how attribution is definitely an art, and there's a little bit of like, magic ball in there. But I think for sure, we've seen, for example, a lot of customers join, but a lot of prospects as well. We've seen more and more people who have been in touch with our kind of contrast webinars then go down the funnel. How much that can be attributed is always, a bit up to interpretation, but we do see really positive signs. And honestly, just kind of that positioning and that branding in itself is worth a lot to us.
Yeah, it's kind of a big bet, right?
Right.
It's a bit of what you can track and a bit of trust the process, trust the
Right.
thought leadership and the brand.
And now that it's essentially a content machine for us, we really kind of milk it so much more than just having these webinars on our website, right? Now it like feeds our content for months and months afterwards.
I love that content machine. So one of the questions I had for you was, so I've watched a lot of your webinars, and I think that they're really great. I love that you're inviting guests on so many different topics, and I think you have, your engagement rates are good. People are active in the chat. People are asking questions. I would consider at least your webinars to be really successful. And I was wondering, what's the secret? What do you think that you do well that makes your webinars something that you want to keep doing and keep investing in?
So yeah, I had a thought about this with the team as well, and we managed to highlight, I think, 4 main points. So if you don't mind, I'll just kind of power through.
Go for it.
First, I think we really put a lot of effort into choosing kind of the right, like maybe hot topics and speakers. And we try to keep a full agenda. So we already have webinars that are scheduled now for in like 3-4 months, right? So we really try to keep that momentum up. And since our product, its essence, it's built to address some very particular pain points that product managers have, we have this knowledge at our fingertips. So we use this to inform what types of topics could people be struggling with. That's really kind of shows that we have like a finger on the pulse, but shows as well that, we really want to bring these tangible solutions to them. And a lot of the feedback that we get in the chat is like, wow, this is like one of the best webinars we've been to on this topic. And it's not necessarily because of us. It's because we have the right speaker with the right like combination of topics, and just the fact that we kind of like give this platform. However, second point, if you just set it up and you just let it live there, nothing is going to happen. So people are not going to proactively find you. So we've really tried to set up a really extensive distribution network for our webinars. We treat them almost like a marketing campaign. So we run ads for them. We, have banners on our website. We promote them through our socials, through our CEO's socials, through the invitee or the speaker, their socials. We really try to, we post it on Slack communities. We really try to like maximize the visibility because it's ultimately a really useful free asset for them, for the whole community. And then, yeah, like I think you mentioned the last point at the beginning already, fostering this engagement. I think our webinars tend to be, quite like filled with learnings and point A, point B. We still use slides and stuff, but there's still a lot of like back and forth. And, we love the fact that with Contrast, you can take the question from the chat and like full screen it and then really bring everyone's attention. And then there's, really a back and forth happening in the chat. So yeah, that exactly like that.
Who
Look
did
at how
this?
great
This
that's
was
working.
exactly what I wanted to do. I saw Laura's question in the chat, and I was thinking, I pray to God that either Tim or Luke are gonna put it on screen. So this is what this is what Olivia
Perfect.
was talking about. Exactly
Precisely.
that. Maybe we can take the question, Olivia. Do
Sure.
you pay speakers usually, and what's the range?
We have not paid for any speakers. We kind of try to foster these really good relationships also because a lot of times speakers are trying to either sell a book or sell a course, or they have their own kind of marketing goals. They're trying to grow their newsletter audience. So if you end up then agreeing to promote them, agreeing to send links as a follow-up, right? Because it doesn't end there. You also follow up with people afterwards. That tends to be enough for them.
Yeah,
Some people have asked about it, but we haven't gotten to that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, I mean, and so yeah, something I wanted to add is your capacity to choose the right guests is also a proof in itself of your understanding of the audience pains and who the right people are, who they're following, or who the sort of the thought leaders are in the domain. And then that's really like a win-win, right? Because then you get them on, you can create the clips, the assets, and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so the reason we specifically asked you to jump onto this webinar is we saw you and your team playing around quite a bit with Repurpose AI. And my question would be, how has this changed your workflow? What is the difference between before you had Repurpose AI and now? How do things work differently?
I think you guys mentioned it earlier, just hours and headache. And you guys were talking about like how it was right before when there was still ChatGPT. I remember a time when there wasn't ChatGPT and you were and there wasn't like AI transcripts and stuff, and you just had to have good note taking and listen back and forth. And sometimes it was just this one intern or whatever. Sometimes it was me. It's just, those days are not so far away. And those were literally, it sounds super easy to just take it and change formats and whatever, but to make good content, engaging content, it's not. And now this tool has saved us multiple times of needing to leave to different tools, but also just generally a ton of manual effort.
Amazing. I remember, so not at Contrast, but my previous job, we had this girl who was working in content, and she would literally transcribe manually the whole webinar.
Oh yeah.
She would spend it would take half an afternoon.
Yeah.
2-3 full hours just get it down word for word. So that's those were the days, right? At least she wasn't typing it on a typewriter.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Last and final question before we go into the sort of demo part. What has been your favorite or most successful webinar? Maybe both.
I think we've had a couple that have really kind of exceeded our expectations. I think the one we had a couple months ago, this building customer-centric products with Jeff Godelf, he basically had such a like kind of fun demeanor and like some really like solid, easy points to follow. I think everyone really enjoyed that one, and we've gone all repurpose on it already. So yeah, that's probably my favorite.
Amazing. Would you mind if we could maybe pull up that webinar and you could show us, once the webinars are replay, what does the process look like? Either for you or your team. Maybe you have multiple people working on it. But here, let me just add your screen. I must say, I love your covers. I love the whole universe. I think they look really nice.
We have a great team, that's for sure.
And they stand out. They stand out quite a bit. I can tell you, I've seen hundreds of webinar cover images. I think you can imagine I've seen my fair share, and I think yours really look nice. So that's
thanks.
That's definitely have that going for you. So which one is it, and sort of show us what does it look like when you repurpose?
So this one here, I think it had one of our most views and replays. And so we already have, I might also just switch here quickly. We already have, as you can see, like the outcome of what this repurpose kind of gave us with these clips and stuff included. So this is kind of that final, the final result that we're after. And in order to get there, there was quite a few things that we did. So our first departure point is kind of what you were showing in the small screenshots. We take this kind of like quick links that you guys have down here, Repurpose with AI, and we'll probably start with just the highlights, right? We'll start with just kind of, like you said, reminding ourselves, okay, what were the main points? Even if you were part of it, you might forget. And based on these highlights, we then, for example, will publish it internally on Slack just to give people an idea. Hey, if you missed it, sales, don't forget, this is a great webinar for XYZ. We then might start thinking about future topics, right? So based on these highlights, based on these these points, makes a lot of sense to say, hey, so what's the next topic that we could follow up with Jeff on that might be kind of related to this? And we'll ask maybe in the refine result. And we'll probably use some of these highlights. Yeah, sure.
Olivia, could you show us what that looks like? You can maybe say, from these highlights, could you give me 3 ideas of webinars? That way everyone can see what refine looks like live. Amazing. So just ask a question and then deep into the
nice little potential summary as well. So super helpful. And even if in the end we might not do it with Jeff, we kind of keep these, or we have these kind of in a backlog that then help us a lot when we're kind of filling up that pipeline for the future.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so we use obviously the other features as well. I think the highlights, what it kind of has as a plus is that it's a little bit more zoomed out, and then you can really imagine like what the different formats are based on it. So blog posts, I think we showed you earlier, will end up, it takes a little bit of time for it to populate, but we'll end up having some sort of a general structure here, which then probably requires maybe 2 or 3 refinements on top. It could be, for example, you mentioned the value of having a lot of kind of personal anecdotes and stuff. That stuff is really great, but sometimes maybe loses or makes you lose the point a little bit on a blog, or maybe it's a little bit out of place. So one thing we might say as a follow-up is like, remove the anecdote about X. Or there was one guy, for example, it wasn't Jeff, it wasn't Tony. He was mentioning a lot of like medical anecdotes and like, oh yeah, and this guy and this like special medical tool, and I was getting a little lost there. So that's the kind of stuff that I might be like, it's not in place for a blog, let's just cut it out.
These refinements, do you do them manually, or do you use refine?
We will refine probably 2 or 3 times, and then if there's anything additional that's just like a small thing, instead of messing up the stuff we already like, we'll copy it out and then just kind of do it manually, or maybe ChatGPT a small section if we need to. But let's say I would say at least 75% of it happens in the tool.
Okay, amazing. So then you take this, you do a few refines, maybe you're working between here and like a Google Doc, like a Notion page or something like that. And then, as Luke mentioned earlier, this isn't ready to publish, right? You need to add images, you need to add links, you need to add clips, extracts, stuff like that. So do you also use Repurpose to sort of help with those, or?
Extract for sure. So like I showed you guys earlier, highlights plays a really great role there. We then might promote the blog along with the webinar replay afterwards in a follow-up email. So that's where kind of the newsletter section of this comes in. If I can maybe just quickly jump over to that. We would use this to send people a summary. We might not take the whole thing because it is a little bit long, but we might just say, okay, those 3 or 4 main highlights that it spat out, those are great for anyone who missed it to pique their interest to watch the replay. So we might do that. And last but not least, with the LinkedIn side of things as well, here is where I feel like it spits out a great summary, also with hashtags and stuff in there already. But like, this is where that personal voice is really, really important, because it's usually from our CEO or whatever. So we might say this from the standpoint of a B2B SaaS CEO, and then we'll obviously give it a little bit more personal character. But yeah,
I've never seen it drop a PS. I love the fact that it added a PS. That's amazing.
No, right?
But I think you touched on something really interesting, because I'm trying to get Tim to post more on LinkedIn. Right? It's hard to get your CEO to post more on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier if you can give them a draft or a couple of bullet points to then write something that they like around the topic, rather than starting from scratch, right? So even if this isn't ready to publish, it doesn't really matter, because from this, in 10 to 15 minutes, you can maybe get something, same topics, better tone, right?
Yeah.
So when you do the LinkedIn post or the newsletter, do you do this for the whole transcript, or do you select parts of the text? And
it'll depend. I think we start with the whole transcript, because if it's not too overwhelming, we might as well be as kind of all-encompassing as possible. But if not, then we might select a certain section. So based on the reactions that we saw, if we're like, oh, I really love this tip, this graph is awesome, or whatever, then we'll maybe do something that focuses just on that, and then have the nice clip that goes by it. But that's kind of up to the different, webinar. That depends. Yeah.
Amazing. Have you had maybe final question, have you had the opportunity to play with suggested clips yet?
Yeah, a little bit. So would that be this part here?
Oh, no, it would be the part under clips. But so here you can, if you select a piece of text here.
Yeah. I think
then here, if you clip it, you'll be able to add your subtitles.
Yes, that I do recall.
But only for shorter ones.
Yeah, I was trying to think, there was one that was about outcomes. So this is what I'll usually do. I'll use the highlights to figure out what were those keywords that like really, stood out. Okay, outcomes. So let's maybe, for example, this part. We want to maybe just highlight, yeah, maybe until here. Yeah, I think that's probably good. We might then clip. However, I sometimes like to edit it first and to remove any if, ands, buts, kind of some stuff that doesn't sound so natural. This part, for example, it was really hard to tell that it was like a quote, so I actually edited it earlier myself. So once I find that, then I'm like, all right, we're ready to go. Then we'll usually make a clip out of it.
Amazing. So quick tip. Here, it's easier if you edit word by word.
Yes.
So you keep the highlighted words. But yeah, I mean, Olivia, this was amazing. It's always so much fun to see people using the product live and coming up with use cases that maybe we hadn't thought about. Luke, show me a thumb if I can push you back on screen. You ready? Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, Olivia, thanks so much. Please let us know in the chat if you have any questions. I know we're kind of done with time. We can stay a few more minutes. I mean, I have a bit more time. Maybe if Olivia does too, then she can stay. But drop your questions in chat, either for Luke, for Olivia, for myself, and we'd love to either hear your feedback or do what we can to answer. Let me take this off screen. What did you learn anything new, Luke? Seeing Olivia click through.
I think the way that you guys use Refine is really cool, because it's one of the most, I think, hidden features where we maybe didn't do enough education or made it very easy for people to understand that you can do this.
Yeah.
So it was great to see that you guys know how to do it.
What types of content do you think perform best? So I'm guessing this is repurposed content. So newsletters or blogs or clips. Yeah, what have you had the most success with?
It really depends on what your goal is, right? If you're looking for kind of short-term virality, then sharing a clip on socials makes a lot more sense. If you're playing the long game and you're thinking about SEO and you're thinking about how can I keep my publishing schedule up, then you're probably looking at a blog. But anyways, don't forget, always enrich your content with clips. So any kind of clips or quotes from socials and stuff are really good for SEO. So I think that's also another standpoint. So it just depends on what your goal is, really.
Amazing. Yeah, I think different formats are always going to have different objectives, right? Yeah. You're not going to have the same lifespan from a 30-second clip, then maybe you cut out a 5-minute segment and put it on YouTube, and that can get views forever, right? That would potentially keep getting views in weeks. Maybe your guest is now a super famous, superstar, and that person keeps driving views. I think we have another question here. Can you bring that one up by Harriet? Thank you. So who's doing Q&A? Thank you so much. What an incredible tool. Thank you, Harriet. It's very nice. Lots of learning. It's amazing to see how you're tuning with Marketeer. Does it plug into HubSpot in a similar way to go to webinar? Start a name competitor. No, this is a great question, and I think Luke has been working with our head of engineering on both content for the website about our HubSpot integration and also improvements to our HubSpot integration. So very quickly, and then Olivia uses HubSpot too. So
yeah,
we'll
get her feedback on that. HubSpot integration. So.
Okay. Let me just drop two sentences. It
almost looks like this question was planted.
It's all staged. I don't know how you guys did it, but.
Harriet, are you an industry plant? No. So we very quickly we have a native HubSpot integration. It connects in a couple of seconds. It's the top-rated HubSpot integration for webinars on the HubSpot marketplace. And you can do pretty much anything you want. All of your contrast webinar data is in HubSpot. But Olivia, I'd love to know what you think about the integration and how you use the data.
Yeah, so I'm actually calling up a screen here. I will show you guys in just a second. We let me just go to an example here. We had, like I mentioned, we've had other competitors in the past, but none of them have allowed us to have this level of visibility as Contrast has. I'm trying to find a good example, but I'm not maybe able to on the fly. But basically, we can see some key facts that really help our salespeople when they follow up afterwards, or our customer success even, to figure out what was their kind of like level of engagement with that webinar. So did they register? Did they attend? How long did they attend? What's the percentage of time they were there? Did they answer any poll questions? If so, what did they answer? All of this stuff is really gold when you're like trying to reach out maybe after a webinar, or like, you know, if you have some sort of like a success call, that's really great. And then of course they are separate activities, so they can be kind of like filtered. They can be used also. There's several fields that are actually, you know, kind of custom fields that can then be used to like filter reports and stuff. So we've found that really great, really easy to use, and visually it's just kind of like right there.
Did we just lose Olivia?
I think we lost Olivia.
Oh no. Oh, that's such a shame. I wanted to. Oh no, we lost Olivia. Okay, let's see. Oh.
She back? She's having some connection issues.
This happens. These things happen. This is what it's
guys,
like
the whole
produce.
time. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
It's just been 5 seconds. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's totally fine. So yeah, you're saying the timeline activities.